Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, Read Good, Draw Bad, where we love to read amazing books and draw amazingly bad. If you're new to my channel, I am doing the Modern Library's list of the top 100 novels of the 19th century. And today we are here to discuss Book 100 by Booth Tarkington, The Magnificent Ambersons. When I originally started this challenge, I started it thinking that, I should be able to sort of speed through some of the earlier entries. And I'm just looking at this list and I think I've realized that I may have bitten off more than I can chew, but I'm still gonna stick to it. And you know what they say, like, die trying or something. So being about 5 books into this list, I am still reading other books because I need to sort of put the serious books with my fun books and mix them up a little bit. I'm already feeling a bit pressed for time and we're only 1 month in and wow, that's really stressful. And part of the reason that Book 100 review took so long is because I had so many thoughts about it. It really took me a while to organize what exactly I want to say and share, because actually this book, quite a banger. Anyways, today is the grand start of this journey. Book 100 of 100 books, where we will learn, discuss, think deeply about many issues that novelists everywhere thought, I need to write about this thing to understand, unearth, and uncover what the 19th century, 20th century has to tell us about literature. Picture it, Sicily, 1873. I mean, picture it kind of like Indianapolis, 1873. And let's say you are a young person just trying to enjoy their life after the Civil War, and suddenly life is just getting back to normal in a little place that doesn't have too much going on, except for there's this one rich family with this one really annoying rich kid who rides his horse up and down the street, terrorizing everyone every day. And if you want to complain to his grandfather or his mother, you would get nowhere because he was mommy's little angel and this kid knew he was the devil. The worst part about it is you have a right to be mad about how rich this kid is. He was the sole grandchild who is set to inherit all of his family's intergenerational wealth because he literally got everything anyone could ever ask for and he didn't have to do a single thing to get it. George Minifer. And that is the main character of this book. And this author writes a novel that I think has a lot to say about modern society, rich people, and where technology is going, which is very relevant to people like you and me today. But we're going to hear all about it in today's book review. Before that, let's get to the too long didn't read summary. These are the main characters of the book. George Minifer, who is the young man, the grandchild, who is set to inherit the Amberson fortune. Isabel Amberson, his mother, who can think nothing but good things about George, no matter how many bad things he does, and he does a lot of bad things. His grandfather, Major Amberson, the grandpa with all the cash and a war hero. Jack Amberson, who is George's uncle, generally makes a lot of really bad decisions within the book. Fanny Minifer, who's his meddlesome aunt. George's dad, who has all the personality of a burnt slice of toast or a cardboard box. Then there's some other aunts and uncles to kind of immediately leave within the first couple chapters. Honestly, George's horse Pendennis has more to do with the story than some of his other family. Then we have the Morgan family, 2 central characters who are intertwined with Isabel and George Minifer. There's Eugene Morgan, who is the true love of Isabel Amberson and also an automobile tycoon. Then his daughter, Lucy Morgan, who's the true love of George Minifer. The setting is said to be similar to Indianapolis, with the house that the Ambersons grow up with matching one of the estates in Indianapolis. It has lots of statues of Roman and Greek gods. It has fountains. They have a stable, they have like multiple houses on it. As George grows, his young childhood to his 20s to his 30s, setting also changes. So therefore the city itself is growing because of the explosive power of the automobile industry. The appearance of the automobile industry is sometimes called the Second Industrial Revolution in America. And what starts as kind of a one-horse town, not to make fun of George's horse, eventually becomes a city that is full of automobiles and people really interested in going places. And I think a lot about the horse in this novel, which is really funny, which at first is seen as valuable and a trusted member of the family. But as the power of the automobile industry grows, the usefulness and interest in owning a horse and the value of the horse slowly diminishes, because eventually owning an automobile is a much more sensible financial decision than owning a horse, which back in the day seemed like such a wild idea. And the Amberson family does not start where it ends, which is mostly in misfortune. Now let's talk about the themes of this book. This book at its heart is a coming-of-age story about a young man and his decisions, and how he was going to live his life in the face of both great fortune and great misfortune. There are some great moments in this book of where George takes his misinterpreted beliefs and ideas based on information that's in error or wrong, and eventually casts off those beliefs to be more in line with what a modern American young man should do. Another theme of this book is about the new American ideal of the 1900s versus the European ideals, and about how they had ideas about being the great new nobility of the American people, when in reality, the great families that make up the American history were going to be the entrepreneurs and the people who created the great businesses of the 20th century. And this relates to the other theme, which is about the advancement of technology in American society and how it shaped the conversation about who's who and who's important in America. And lastly, I would say a major theme of this book is about pride as a vice, and is specifically about pride being the downfall of George Minafer Amberson. You know, if he could be a little more humble, both him and his mom would probably have been a lot more happy. Now, on to the review. This book might be one of my new favorite books, but not for the reason you might think. The plot of this book is simplistic and kind of outline. This story is about flat, somewhat unoriginal characters and caricatures of people at the start of the 1900s. It's honestly a boring story about a boring rich family being rich. But what makes this, to me, a very good book is that it's a coming-of-age story. And the coming-of-age story has a point, because I love seeing characters grow and develop and show that they can be a better person, if that's the point of the book. George Minafer starts off as like a lazy, annoying rich kid, but then meets Lucy Morgan, Eugene Morgan's daughter, and he starts to change and realize that he needs to change if Lucy is going to accept him into her life. Isabel, who is by all means a better person overall, but for her, she can't seem to change so that she can realize her own true happiness. And this is where the crux of two star-crossed love stories put together with a coming-of-age story. And it's just kind of like a 1-2 KO punch of Eugene Morgan and Lucy Morgan and their modern, amazing ideals that are changing the world, while the Ambersons are slowly falling into ruin because they can't recognize the power of what is coming and changing. And lastly, because I believe this love story is very touching, George really loves Lucy, and that comes through multiple times within this story. Lucy is George's first love, and he doesn't love another woman the whole rest of the book, which is basically the whole rest of his life. And it's just such a touching story of someone who falls head over heels in love. Some of those themes that I brought up earlier about how noble ideals were maybe not that accessible or that sensible in modern American society that was just starting to emerge in the city that he's growing up in, and about how they're perceived by other people. Because when you have enough money in the world and you don't care about money anymore, what do you care about? You care about status. And like most rich kids, George Minafer Amberson is going to get a real shock when reality kicks him in the face, almost quite literally. And the reason to me, in my mind, that this is a modern novel and it belongs on the list of the modern library is because this author, Booth Tarkington, illuminates the inner mind and inner thoughts of George and really illuminates the inner psychology of this character and why he makes decisions the way he makes decisions. And it feels very much like reading Jane Austen or Emily Bronte. And this inner life is so important because he has all the luck in the world and no bad thing has ever really happened to him his entire life. And then in the culmination of the last, I would say, quarter of the novel, his mom dies, his dad dies, he loses the entire family fortune and has to go live in an apartment with his nosy aunt, who, by the way, signed them up for a 3-year lease for an enormous amount of money. George realizes he is going to have to work for a living, which most American people see as an honest thing to do. And George's life goes from being perfect to being quite perfectly terrible. And this, to me, is why this book, I think, is quite the masterpiece. It doesn't let George become just a cutout or a caricature, because when the book starts, the author does an excellent job of making you believe this could never happen to this rich person. And this, to me, is what makes it a modern coming-of-age story. He realizes exactly what his mistakes were in life, and I think he knows what he would change, because the author lets us in on his emotional psychology, on his depth of feeling. And it's a really sad moment in the book when he realizes that actually he was one of the only people who believed in his family that they should stick together and love each other in a very strong and very relatable kind of way. They're a big family, and instead of sticking together, each one of the different members of the family takes a piece of the family fortune, fritters it away, and so instead of there being intergenerational wealth, each person starts making selfish decisions in the Amberson family that eventually lead to the complete downfall of their family fortune. All the things that George was worried about in the book, about what people thought about him, about his personal reputation, about his family reputation. At the end of the book, he realizes no one even really cared what he was doing. The only person that cared about George's reputation was him. And this is where that problem of pride comes before the fall. And it's illustrated perfectly, because if George had been a bit more humble, a bit more understanding, a bit more knowledgeable about what was going on in his family and in his family's life, I think some of the tragedies wouldn't have happened. Before I finish this review, I just have to make a special note about the author, because until I read this book, I had never heard of Booth Tarkington, because he has managed to win 2 Pulitzer Prizes for his books, one of them being the Magnificent Ambersons, and no one has ever heard of him. He is just a completely forgotten footnote in history. And that is very strange, because even though he had a relatively famous movie made by Orson Welles, The Magnificent Ambersons, which did not do well in theaters, but was well known, and a lot of people still talk about it over the book, which I find really surprising, because you know the other 2 people who were the only 2 Americans to win 2 Pulitzer Prizes? That would be John Updike and William Faulkner. And you should know, we still talk about John Updike and William Faulkner. So why does no one talk about Booth Tarkington anymore? I read many news articles. I tried to find as much history and watched a few interviews with Booth Tarkington. And from what I can tell, he should probably be up there with William Faulkner and John Updike as someone who we study a little bit more in history than some of the other authors that I think about as part of a modern literary canon. At a time when we're facing what our technological overlords will look like in the future, the theme of rapidly changing technology and how it will change the face of multiple industries across a country or across the world are some of the things that we face on the daily. Something that I think Tarkington understood really well based on this book is that a whole dynasty of rich families can completely crumble with a disruptive technology or a disruptive world event, and then suddenly status doesn't matter so much anymore, but instead what matters is the connections that you built with the people around you and the people you choose to love and take care of. I highly recommend this book, and I think this book was a great way for me to start the Modern Library's list of top 100 novels of the 20th century. If you want, you can find this book on Project Gutenberg in multiple formats, I think including audiobook. Okay, well that's all for me for this review of Book 100. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe, and I'm looking forward to Book 99, which is The Ginger Man by J.P. Donlevy. So until then, I will see you next time, and stay curious, stay reading.